I've always struggled with my mental health. When I was little, I had the worst anxiety. I couldn't ever talk to even family friends. I could never talk to them. It's always hard making friends. I was always crying. I was always scared. It was always really hard. When I was in 7th grade, I found the term social anxiety. And that's kind of when I pieced everything together and realized that's what I have. And it's really bad. Sometime later in 7th grade, after I realized what I had, I told my mom, and she was pretty much like, that makes sense, because I'd always been like that. And it's not something I grew out of, it's something I still had. So it was something we had to deal with. My mom's from the US, my dad's from Mexico City. They met in Mexico, they got married, they had me, and my dad moved in with us. And coming from a different country, everything was really hard for him to adjust to. And that took a toll on his mental health, took a toll on our family. Towards the end of 7th grade, my mom separated from my dad. Before 8th grade started, we went to family therapy, but it didn't work out because I just wasn't at a place where I could talk to anyone. My social anxiety was still really, really bad. So when I was in 8th grade, I was prescribed Celexa to treat my depression and anxiety. And I was also prescribed Xanax. Eventually, I was weaned off of Celexa and onto Prozac. And I was prescribed Ativan instead of Xanax because it's less addictive. To say the least, the only thing I have to thank for still being alive is my medication. Where I am right now is the least anxious I've ever been. And I never thought I would be here. My mom never thought I would be here, like talking in front of a camera. That's not something I could have ever done before. When I'm older, I think my mental health will be both worse and better. I'll never be perfectly happy, but I'll never be completely depressed. It's always gonna be a little bit of both. The reality is, you just have to deal with both in order to get the good.
I feel like in the media, guys' mental health is represented poorly. When guys suffer from a mental illness, they seem to react to them in a bad way, usually through anger or through subsiding the pain by like coping mechanisms that aren't necessarily healthy. And they don't really take the necessary precautions that you should take if you're suffering from a mental illness. I feel like what the media can do to represent guys' mental health is to actually represent fixing their mental illnesses in a good way. They should be showing males going to a therapist. Although the media represents guys' mental health very poorly, they do a really good job of representing mental illness as a whole. And because of that, me and my friends are more knowledgeable about the effects of mental illnesses. I feel like with my close friends, I definitely do not have a problem talking about my problems. With my girlfriends, I don't have an issue because psychologically girls are more emotionally intelligent than men. So the way that girls tend to interact with each other, I would say is completely different from how guys tend to communicate with each other. When girls communicate with each other, they tend to talk about feelings or what they're going through emotionally or their issues and problems, which is very different from what guys talk about, which is just anything that doesn't really have to do with emotions or our feelings. I would say that guys feel awkward whenever they're talking to another guy about their feelings because it's not something that they usually do. Toxic masculinity plays a great role on how I view myself and how I view on others. We already have a sense of what masculinity is, basically looking a certain way, thinking a certain way, doing certain actions, maybe even a certain voice, and it's very easy not to fit into those expectations that society puts on us. And as a result, it's very easy to develop mental illnesses through that.
When I was younger, I remember being a really big perfectionist.
Whenever I did my schoolwork or any art projects, I would always want them to look a certain way. In my mind, I wanted them to be perfect. And if they didn't end up looking the way I wanted, I would get really upset. As I got older, I started focusing more on my appearance. For me, with my perfectionism, I got a lot of anxiety if I didn't look a certain way. I started comparing myself to others. I started thinking, wow, they look better than me. I'm below them. When I got to middle school, I started to avoid taking pictures of myself. I was just under the impression that, oh, I'm unphotogenic. No matter what I do, the picture's going to turn out bad. So whenever any one of my friends or family members asked to take a picture with me, I would just refuse. I would look in the mirror and find things wrong with myself, and my anxiety told me, like, everyone could see your flaws too. When I got to high school, my self-esteem was very, very low. I basically stopped trying with my appearance at all because I was just convinced that I couldn't fix it. And that made it really, really hard to make friends. During my freshman year, I only made a handful of friends, and I really felt like I was limiting myself in terms of socializing. By the end of my sophomore year, I realized this wasn't just a small problem. This was affecting other areas of my life, and I needed to do something. When I told my parents that I had a big problem and that I needed help, they were both really understanding and supportive, which I was so grateful for because I never would have been able to get help without it. My mom started taking me to therapy, and gradually I started to get better. When I first started going to therapy, I kind of expected a magical transition where after a few appointments, I would be completely fine. But it took a lot of long months before I started to feel more confident. But as for improving my self-esteem, I started wearing different styles of clothes, and that honestly really helped, feeling comfortable with myself, not feeling too self-conscious to even try with my appearance. Once I actually started trying, I realized that it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks because I feel good right now. I still need to work on comparing myself to others. I often hold up unrealistic expectations for myself. No matter how good I could be feeling on a day, the minute I start comparing myself to others, I immediately feel worthless. And that's something I really need to work on if I want to be totally and completely confident with myself. I feel pretty good with my self-esteem right now. It certainly could be better, but it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. And for that, I'm really thankful. In the future, I don't think I'll have any more problems with my self-esteem. I just think about how much I improved in these last few years, and that gives me a lot of hope for the future.